3, 2, 1, and we are live with Counterbalance. My guest today is Akim Alptekin. He's a Dutch-Turkish businessman. You know him because he is the businessman who hired the company of General Michael Flynn to investigate an Islamist cult in the United States. And the Mueller team, that is Special Counsel Mueller, has accused him of illegally acting as a foreign agent in the United States. Akim, hello.
Hi, that's quite an introduction.
Yeah, well, you're quite a guy. Listen, it's a real great pleasure to have you here. I think you got the basic idea of the channel, my YouTube channel, but let me just explain it just for people who are tuning in for the first time, because I have a feeling that with you as the guest, we're going to get more viewers than ever before. You are the perfect kind of person for this channel, because the idea is that the news media is no longer presenting the Middle East in any kind of realistic way, that the domestic American politics is determining the way our the way our news from abroad is being reported, and the way that our foreign relations are being reported. The media always has its thumb on the scales, and there are all kinds of important voices that we're not hearing from. And you have actually been at the center of one of the most dramatic stories in U.S.-Turkish relations, certainly, but in American domestic politics. And as far as I know, nobody has interviewed you, and it's been amazing to me. They've turned you into a very shadowy character, working in the in the dark, pulling strings and so on. And I know you to be a very forthright guy, a very honest guy with a very clear picture of U.S.-Turkish relations. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to come on and tell your story. So welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Just in the defense of the media, I did get a lot of interview requests. I didn't accept most of them at the advice of legal counsel. But at this point, I've decided that I have a responsibility to speak up. It's been going on too long. I believed very much in the U.S. justice system. I thought at some point they're going to realize that their interpretation of what happened is simply not correct, and they'll let it go, maybe even apologize to me. But it's increasingly clear that that's not happening, at least not by itself. So I felt like I need to speak up. And I'm talking to you at the advice, against the advice of legal counsel, but I feel it's important.
Well, if going against legal counsel is what's required to talk to me, then it's a very good decision.
Very good.
Look, let's start for people who haven't been following you and your story closely. Can you just give a quick summary of what your story is from your point of view?
Sure. I was born in Ankara, but my parents were. My dad was a bureaucrat. My mother was a teacher, but we moved to the Netherlands when I was 4 years old. So I very much feel Dutch as well. So I have dual citizenship. I'm a Dutch-Turkish businessman. I've always had an above-average interest in societal issues. I've been working on Turkish-American relations for very long now. Everyone who knows me knows that. I've worked during the Second Gulf War for Congressman Tom Lantos in the House International Relations Committee, which is now the Foreign Relations Committee.
Pardon me, I have to stop you there, because that's kind of a surprising fact. Tom Lantos, who's passed away, is no longer with us.
God rest his soul.
Hungarian Jew, Holocaust survivor, and the most long-term congressman from California, and I know him to be the most pro-Israel guy in the U.S. Congress, bar none. Which is, I mean, for the U.S. Congress, that's quite a title to hold. So the shadowy Turkish businessman who was working as illegally as a foreign agent, you first became acquainted with Washington working in the office of Tom Lantos.
That's correct. Well, it was the first time I actually lived in Washington, the end of 2002. and in 2003. And I had the great pleasure and honor of working in Congress, and especially for a congressman like Tom, because he was a real statesman-like congressman. And today, I'm a big fan of the founding fathers, and I still believe that despite its flaws, Congress is still the epitome of democratic lawmaking in the world. So despite its flaws, it was great to be there. I learned a lot, especially working in the committee and working for someone like him. He was pro-Israel, but he had his heart in the right place. He was a Democrat. He was the ranking member of the committee. He was hawkish. I would say that I'm hawkish on foreign affairs issues. So I had a great time working there.
Were you operating as a shadowy agent of the of the Turkish government when you were working for Tom Lantos?
Well, not at all. Not at all. I mean, honestly, I never believed that interpretation would ever be an official interpretation of the prosecutor. That's why I also went in voluntarily to talk to them, because I could see some news stories that gave that impression, and I believe maybe it's important to go in and talk. Of course, if I had a decent lawyer, he would have advised me against it. But the lawyer that almost volunteered, who called me up and said, introduced himself as a criminal lawyer. He knew a lawyer that I worked with and trusted. And he basically took me in. He did not tell me he was a former colleague of one of Mueller's prosecutors. And he did not explain the full risk of going in. Now, the problem is, of course, I went in and told the truth, but they're saying that because it doesn't coincide with their version of the truth, I've now 4 additional counts of lying, which amounts to the additional 20 years that I was indicted with.
Wow. No, wait, we've gotten way ahead of the story here.
Yeah.
And you just raised a couple of very interesting things, because, I mean, as you know now, as we're getting more insight into the case of Michael Flynn, there's this whole question about whether his original counsel was really had his best interest in mind when it told him how to deal with the special prosecutor. So you've set up a real parallel there. But let's take it all take it all from the beginning, and start. When did you first become acquainted with General Flynn, and when did you hire him? Why did you hire him? All of that.
Well, as I said, I worked on the Hill in 2003, at the time prior, during, and after the Iraq War. At the time, General Flynn was not yet a general, I believe, but he was already a very well-known officer in the U.S. Army. Anyone who was interested in the Iraq War knew of General Flynn. He was already, he was legendary in the eyes of many people who worked on these issues. So I knew of him, and I respected him a lot. Later, a friend of mine, Bijan Kian, I'd met him when he was a director at the Exim Bank. And he's a good friend of mine, and he told me that he started a company together with General Flynn. It was always something I had in my mind. Maybe I could do something in terms of opening an office of the Flynn Intel Group in Turkey. And while these discussions were going on, while I was thinking about this issue, the coup attempt happened in Turkey. It was July 15, 2016. And of course, Bijan called me to ask me if we were okay, how we were doing. And we started talking. I expressed to him that I felt very strongly that the government of Turkey needed to commission independent, objective research in the United States to expose who this Islamist cult was. And it's not very easy to explain to an American audience or to anyone who they really are, because when you start talking about them, it sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel. And that's why when we say it as Turks, it's difficult to believe maybe for an American audience. So I believed we needed people with credibility, with investigative capabilities, who would do objective research in the United States and then explain it to the U.S. public.
So,
and I believe,
sorry, let me just stop you there for 1 second,
sure.
Because hopefully there are people who are watching this now who haven't been following Turkish politics closely. and you kind of slid over a few things I want to bring out. The Islamist cult we're talking about is the Gulenist movement, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
the July 2016 coup attempt in Turkey, which included fighter jets bombing the parliament and an attempt to kill President Erdogan, is, according to the Turkish government and according to you, and I'll just say according to every right-thinking Turk that I know, was carried out by the Gulenist movement. This is what you're saying, right?
Yes, the central nervous system of this coup, in terms of planning it, masterminding it, was this Islamist cult. And there's absolutely no way anyone who knows a little bit about Turkey can deny this. Of course, we have not been very eloquent at explaining it for several reasons. And the fact that the Gulenists used to be aligned with the government of Turkey does not help either.
But
let's just a fact.
Let's just make sure that our viewers understand that Gulen, the man, the cult leader, is in Pennsylvania right now.
In the Poconos Mountains, yes.
All right. So from the Turkish point of view, and I would just add my own feelings about this. This is totally a credible interpretation of what happened. A guy sitting in the Poconos Mountains masterminded a coup attempt against an American ally.
That's correct.
And you as a, sorry to talk over you, but you as a, I just want to get to this because this is your motivation in doing all this. You as a Turk who cares deeply about U.S.-American relations and also the health of your own country, thought, how the hell is this guy sitting in Pennsylvania? The Americans need to understand this, and we need to investigate all that he is doing in the United States, because he has a whole string of schools and everything. And so you thought, who better to help me with that than the Flynn Intel Group, General Flynn, former head of DIA. Sorry to put all these words in your mouth, but I want to make sure that everybody sees this.
No, I'm glad you did, because I'm so in tune with this subject that I might pass some relevant information for the viewers. But you're absolutely right. That was our thinking. And of course, Bijan has his heart in the right place, but it was his job to create more business for the Flynn Intel Group. So why not accept a commission like this? There was absolutely nothing illegal or absolutely nothing secret about it, other than obviously we did not want the Gulenists to know that we were doing this for a lot of reasons. Plus, I felt strongly that the government of Turkey should retain them. For financial reasons, I didn't want to pay for it. The budget that I could allocate for it, which I ended up paying for myself, is a much smaller budget than I still believe should be spent on this issue. And it's not, the government of Turkey has hired lawyers and other people, but I believe it's not enough. So I made that point, and I tried to convince the government, and at some point I thought I did convince them, but it was a very busy time for them as well, and it didn't push through soon enough. So that's when I stepped in and decided to do it myself, and it was all very quick. And I can understand, actually, that there was some confusion on the side of the prosecutor's office after they read all these media stories about what happened, and then they saw some of the things that were in our communications, which we voluntarily gave to them. I can understand there was some confusion about who hired the Flynn Intel Group, but in the end, and we've always said this, the government of Turkey entertained the idea of hiring the Flynn Intel Group, but ended up not hiring them, and I did that. I stepped in for a more limited, smaller budget as a proof of concept. And my intention was not to curry favor with the Trump admin, because there was no way of knowing for me that Trump would be the next president of the United States. Actually, when I commissioned this contract, it was August 2016, chances looked very strongly that Hillary Clinton would win. So if my intention had been to curry favor with the U.S. administration and to act as an illegal agent on behalf of my government, I probably would have hired Podesta, not the Flynn Intel Group.
Hold on. Tony Podesta you're talking about.
Yes, as someone close to Hillary Clinton. And the problem actually is that this Islamist cult, they have more than 200 fronts in the United States, and they have almost 300 schools. they're very, very close to the Hillary Clinton machine. And they've donated to people closer. They've donated to her. They've donated to her foundation. They understand the American system and they abuse it. So these schools, it's public record that the schools of these gulenists, on a yearly average in recent years, gets about $750 million, $750 million in subsidies from the federal government. So this is imagine this is U.S. taxpayers' money being paid to schools that are inspired by an Islamist imam living in the Poconos Mountains. So I believe the American public would have an issue with this if they only knew about it, but they don't.
That's almost as crazy as the idea that the FBI would frame a well-respected former general head of the DIA and present them as a foreign agent of working on behalf of Turkey. It's almost that crazy. But look, we live in crazy times. Keep going.
Sorry for interrupting you. But
no, go.
He's been accused a lot of many things. And it's not my job. Again, legal advice, legal counsel advises me not to defend General Flynn. And it's not my job to do so. He's doing a good job, and his lawyers are doing a good job at it themselves. But I feel a responsibility to look the American people in the eyes and say, because he was accused of being a traitor, and that must be extremely difficult for someone who served in the capacities that he served, who put his life on the line for 33 years, to be accused of treason, and for something that he did in a commercial setting that's 100% legal, that was initiated by me. So I feel bad about that. And I can tell you, anyone who has ever met General Flynn, who has interacted with him, knows that you have to be a very courageous guy to offer him to betray his country. It doesn't matter for the amount of money. I don't think you would survive that meeting. General Flynn is not someone you can easily approach and ask him to betray his country. Anyone who knows him, even the people who don't like him maybe, but who've interacted with him, will tell you that. It's preposterous. It's preposterous. And I'm shocked to this day that something like this could happen in the United States. It's unbecoming of the United States. It's the oldest democracy in the world. The reason that people like me are such a good friend of the United States, because we think in many ways it's a North Star for other younger democracies like Turkey. And I'm afraid this entire Mueller investigation has tremendously damaged the American reputation here in Turkey.
Oh, that's so interesting to hear, because of course, since these jokers began this cockamamie investigation, they've always said, that they're saving our democracy from Russia, and Trump is destroying our democracy, and he's destroying our foreign policy, and so on. And there has yet to be a really serious assessment. This is me editorializing. I'm sorry, you struck a chord with me with what you said. There's yet to be a serious assessment of the damage to American foreign policy that this cockamamie investigation has done. But you're a great example, because you are exactly the kind of person that the United States needs right now. You know Washington, you know Ankara, you're respected in both places. You care deeply about the relationship. You're willing to expend your own resources to help improve the relationship. And you have been damaged. Your reputation has been damaged. You've been damaged financially. I'm sure we'll get to that. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm editorializing now. You got my blood flowing. Let me get back to you. Get back to your story. I wanted to clarify one thing for the viewers. Bijan Kian, he is an American citizen, right?
Absolutely.
And a friend of yours, a commercial associate of General Flynn. And you knew Flynn by reputation. Maybe you had met him as well, but you were close friends with Bijan Kian, and that's another reason why you went with the Flynn Intel Group. And again, the date you hired them was? It was
sometime. The contract was signed somewhere in August 2016.
August 2016, and you had no idea. You didn't do this. You weren't trying to make a deal with the former, with the future national security advisor, because at that point you had no idea that that's what he was going to be.
How could I possibly know?
Yeah. Well, that would make you, together with Vladimir Putin, the smartest analyst in the world of American politics, right?
I mean, they only met once, and the prosecution made a big deal of that meeting. They only met once with Turkish officials. And I had to really convince both sides. It took a lot of effort for me to convince both sides to allocate time in their busy agendas to meet with each other. I was the chairman of the Turkish-American Business Council, which is the oldest bilateral business council. Our membership largely exists of big companies that have invested billions of dollars into the United States. We're employing thousands of Americans. So it's a very reputable trade organization. So I think the Turkish side did not want to say no because I was the chairman of that trade organization. On the other hand, General Flynn and his associates, like Bijan, did not want to say no because they were on a contract with me and they liked me. And they did believe there was also probably some use in terms of their own work, in terms of their public role, to meet with the delegation of Turkish officials who were there for the United Nations General Assembly. And in that meeting, our contract never came up. So there was no tit for tat, no quid pro quo, not us asking or the Turks asking for anything. There's been written so much nonsense about it, like millions of dollars that have been offered to the general. It's all complete and utter nonsense. I want to use different words, but I have like my lawyer sitting here on my lap, and he's probably already, is going to decide not to represent me after this interview. But I mean, it's so crazy things that were said. And what happens is you get convicted by the media before the trial even starts. And we've seen that in the Bijan Kian trial, where initially the media failed. Then the prosecution failed, and then the jury failed because the jury found him guilty. Whereas the judge, thank God, did not fail. The judge actually said that no rational jury could come to that conclusion. So, for lack of evidence, he overturned the verdict of the jury, which I'm sure must have been very difficult for this judge. But thank God, in that sense, the system apparently still works. Hopefully a bit sooner in the future than later, but it's just been a very, very difficult process. At some point, I had a crying mother on the line. I had to explain to my mother, who had read some articles in the media, that it wasn't true. So she was asking me, imagine your own mother asking you, my son, why did you do this? And I had to explain to her there was absolutely no way I would ever do that. And she was telling me, we did not raise you this way. Like, why in God's name did you do it? And I had to explain to her that what they were written was simply not true. So it's very difficult to explain to the viewers, what we've been through. But you won't understand it unless you live through it. And I'm sure, I had the luxury of not presenting myself to the courts. And I've been criticized for that as well. If you're innocent, why don't you go to the United States and make your case there? Well, I'm sorry, I have 3 children. And everyone who has been following this Mueller investigation, I don't want to speak to the personal motivations of people involved and the institutions involved, but everyone knows there's a political context. And with all due respect for the U.S. justice system, everyone also knows that mistakes can be made. That sometimes people serve 40 years, 50 years, innocent people, and then you say, oh, I'm sorry, we now realize you were innocent. And their life is over. So, I simply don't feel I can take that risk, not in such a highly politicized environment. And I have 3 children, and I just can't do that.
But you said earlier, help me with the timeline here, because you said earlier that you came forward and you gave evidence. Yes. On the advice of your lawyer. So when you first heard that your name was being used, you came forward. Explain to me how that happened.
Yeah. I don't. Imagine this: I'm in the United States and I'm traveling back and forth, I was in the United States with my family for most of the transition periods, even during the first 2 months of the presidency. Imagine if I had been engaged on in illegal activity on behalf of a foreign government. Do you think I would have stayed in the United States? Does that make sense to you? Would I keep my kids in the United States? And imagine I'd done that and my job was over. I'd done this very, very illegal thing. And then after, I think it was March 2017, that my family and I went back to Turkey. After that, I traveled frequently to the United States because, I was the chairman of this trade organization. We have a lot of investment conferences and different events. So I used to travel back and forth. Do you think if I was involved in something illegal, especially after the news that General Flynn was being investigated, that the Trump campaign was being investigated, was already out there, do you think I would feel comfortable enough to travel to the United States? It makes no sense whatsoever. So, of course, I knew that I had done nothing wrong, nothing illegal, and the work that I have commissioned is something that happens in DC every day. And there's nothing illegal about it. So with that confidence, I continued traveling. And then I think it was May 2018 even, maybe. It was May 2018 that I was again in DC for an investment conference that I co-hosted actually with General Jim Jones, who is the former national security advisor of President Obama. And I had no reservation whatsoever being there. So I was reading these articles in the media, and then a lawyer called me. And that lawyer said, I think you might be indicted. And I said, are you crazy? For what?